On the topic of multiverses and infinities of various sizes, we need to explore how all of this works in Arcane Season 2, and although, as always, I am going to try my best to explain things clearly, this is by far the most complex concept I have ever had to cover, so don't worry if it sounds like it doesn't make sense, because it probably doesn't. There are two possibilities with regard to the universe-hopping adventure in Arcane Season 2. My understanding is that future Viktor either found the Wild Rune under the Hex Gates or placed it there himself, and he used it to specifically transport Jace to an alternate universe in which Hex Tech caused the apocalypse. The reason I believe this is what happened is because future Viktor is capable of traveling through time and into alternate universes, and he is also able to do the same to other people. Therefore, I believe future Viktor deliberately manipulated events so that everything would line up as it needed to for the goodies to win at the end of Season 2. He sent Jace to the Apocalypse universe so that Jace would be motivated to stop Viktor, and he sent Echo and Heimerdinger to the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe so that they would create the Z-Drive that he knew would be necessary to defeat Viktor. However, I don't have an explanation for why Viktor sent Heimerdinger and Echo to the same universe 4 years apart. It is possible that I am mistaken here and that future Viktor did not orchestrate everything to play out exactly as it needed to, but if these events were not manipulated, then what happens to Jace and Echo in Season 2 is as contrived as is possible to comprehend. This is not hyperbole. If there are an infinite number of variable universes, then it is infinitely lucky that Jace just so happened to get sent to the Apocalypse one, and it is also infinitely lucky that Echo and Heimerdinger each independently got sent to the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe. Because if all three of these characters did not get sent to precisely where and when they needed to be out of an infinite number of possibilities, then the plot of Season 2 ends. This would be, by definition, infinitely contrived, and this also happens to be a rather good demonstration of how some infinities are larger than others. So, where does that leave us? Well, we know that future Viktor is capable of sending Jace, Echo, and Heimerdinger to specific times in specific universes, and we know that he has the motivation to do what is necessary to prevent the apocalypse in the original universe. So, I am happy to conclude that he is responsible for the various multiversal adventures that appear in Season 2, because this is, of course, less damaging than saying it was lucky or something. So, how does being zapped into an alternate universe actually work? When Echo got zapped into the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe, that universe's Echo ceases to exist, while original Echo pilots his body until the end of the episode. This is not elaborated on, which means that's just how it works. The explanation for this must be something like every individual across every universe having a shared soul, although I hate using that word, and there is only one soul, despite there being an infinite number of echoes. There is some foundational aspect to the multiverse that prevents two duplicate souls being in the same universe at the same time, and so therefore, when one Echo jumps into another universe, he possesses the body of that universe's Echo. This explanation is not in the show, but my guess is that this is approximately what the writers were going for. So, what happens to the Echo from the alternate universe? Does he cease to exist, and he is just on pause until Echo gives him his body back? Is he a conscious entity, a prisoner inside of his own mind? Is he zapped into the Arcane and becomes some kind of transcendent god being temporarily? All questions that cannot be answered, because as we have learned, Arcane does not particularly care about alternate Echo, and it is similarly not at all interested in addressing or exploring the morality of Echo, intentionally or otherwise, inhabiting the body of an alternate version of himself. Also, where is the original Echo's body? It isn't in the original universe, which means that for some reason, it appears that original Echo's body is gone for a bit, as is alternate Echo's consciousness. And the reason it works like this is because of the various dramatic payoffs the writers wanted to hit, which require that there are not multiple versions of Echo running around. It would have been morally uncomplicated to have two Echoes working together to get Echo back to the correct universe, but instead the writers decided to have him possess the body of his alternate self so that he can get intimate with his alternate self's girlfriend. Okay, cool. So why is this not what happened to Jace when Jace went to the Apocalypse universe? The only explanation here can be that alternate Jace was already dead in the Apocalypse universe, which means Jace can just arrive and pilot his own body like a normal person, even though this could just as likely prevent him from even entering this alternate universe, as there is no available Jace in that universe. Point being, Echo and Jace appear to abide by different rules in their multiversal misadventures. But what about Heimerdinger? We are never given any explicit information regarding alternate Heimerdinger, but we have no reason to believe that he is dead, which means Heimerdinger has been possessing the body of an alternate version of himself for 4 years. And you may be thinking, well, that certainly sounds like the least Heimerdinger thing that you could possibly do, but at least he doesn't know that this is what he has done. Unfortunately, no, because Heimerdinger was waiting for Echo to arrive, and he realized Echo had arrived in alternate Echo's body because of his change in behavior, the vomiting, and Echo having absent-mindedly drawn the wild rune on a piece of paper. Which means Heimerdinger absolutely understands that this is how multiversal travel works, because we have to assume that he also experienced an intensely negative reaction shortly after arriving, not to mention him observing Echo's clear change in appearance. Which means our Heimerdinger, the Heimerdinger from Season 1, has stolen 4 years of alternate Heimerdinger's life, has lived in his body and controlled everything about him, and this is simply never addressed. And, of course, by the end, he vaporizes himself, thus also vaporizing alternate Heimerdinger's body. I have been using the words alternate universe and multiverse, but the show never actually uses this terminology. We know for a fact that there are at a minimum 3 separate universes in Arcane. The original universe, the Apocalypse universe, and the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe. As I explained in Part 2, the Apocalypse universe, where Jace is, simply cannot be the original universe but in the future, because Jace prevents the apocalypse in Episode 9. Which means Viktor must have sent him to an alternate universe in which that universe's version of Jace was unsuccessful in preventing the apocalypse. Which means we have, at a minimum, 3 distinct universes. This is not how multiverses work, unless there is a specified reason why Arcane's multiversal concept means that the universes we get are the normal one, the one where Viktor caused the apocalypse, and the one where Vi died and also Silco character assassinated himself. There is, of course, no reason given why these 3 specific universes would be the only variable universes to exist, which means we have to assume that there are an infinite number of variable universes, which is what a multiverse is. The show is incredibly vague as to how all of this works, so to some degree trying to interpret the mechanics is a pointless exercise, but I find it both fun and interesting, and I hope you do too. The easiest interpretation of Arcane Season 2 uses the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Any and all possible combinations of matter, as well as any changes across any length of time, are manifested in alternate universes. There is a universe where you are watching this video. There is a universe where you don't have eyes. There is a universe where you are a banana. Put simply, any and all possibilities exist simultaneously in different universes. This, however, brings with it some problems. If there are an infinite number of universes, then Heimerdinger being able to send Echo back to the right one is so unlikely as to be essentially impossible. This also dramatically affects the stakes of the story, because if there are an infinite number of universes, then this would mean future Viktor attempted to fix many of them, because due to the nature of how multiverses work, an infinite number of Viktors had caused the apocalypse in an infinite number of the infinite universes. So, future Viktor traveled into the past in an unspecified number of these alternate universes, and gave multiple versions of Jace different runes in each, hoping that this would affect the outcome and avert the apocalypse. And every time, he failed. If we are dealing with infinite universes, then the idea of potential futures becomes a meaningless statement, because any potential alteration to a universe would definitionally exist in another. This interpretation of a multiverse is, by definition, deterministic. So this means 2 things. Future Viktor tried to avert the apocalypse by traveling into the past of multiple universes where the apocalypse was guaranteed to happen, and he failed to stop it because he did not understand causality. Additionally, it means that when he failed, he was like, no biggie, I can just move on to the next one. The world of Arcane that we have spent 2 seasons in by this point is simply one of an infinite number. A new version of Jace, a new Piltover, a new everything that future Viktor would like to save if at all possible. This reduces the stakes of the story to a bare minimum, because it doesn't matter if Viktor fails. He can just try again somewhere else. There is no reason why the original universe is more important than any other, or why future Viktor would believe that it is. Additionally, as future Viktor seems to exist outside of space and time, not only does it not matter whether or not he succeeds in any given universe, but he also cannot succeed in any given universe, because the nature of causality means that he either succeeded or he did not, which means there are already an infinite number of universes where Viktor succeeded. Another complicating factor is that you simply can't have a time loop like the one with Viktor saving Jace in a setting where there are an infinite number of universes. These are called bootstrap paradoxes, and another example would be in the first Terminator movie, where Kyle Reese is sent back in time by John Connor to protect Sarah Connor, and as a result, Kyle ends up fathering John Connor and therefore creating his own reason to be sent back in time. These paradoxes involve something from the past creating the future, and the future then creating the past, which creates the future, and so on. The idea that you can change your fate is incompatible with a multiverse, because again, multiverses are, by definition, deterministic. You can't say, well, what if I changed the future by eating Cocoa Pops instead of Cheerios, because your particular universe where you eat Cocoa Pops is already distinct from the one where you eat Cheerios. You don't have a choice. Which means, if Arcane Season 2 is interpreted using the many worlds interpretation, future Viktor did an infinite number of things in an infinite number of universes, an infinite number of times he was successful, and an infinite number of times he was unsuccessful. Or in other words, absolutely nothing matters. Despite Arcane Season 2 being trash, I still wanted to try and find a way to make this work so that I can find out how broken it actually is. And there are multiple suggestions, but no confirmation, that there may in fact only be 2 universes rather than an infinite number. This would instead use something similar to the twin world model, which suggests that there are 2 universes that originated in the same place before expanding temporally in opposite directions. Essentially, one is the universe and the other is the anti-universe. Heimerdinger says, one can't go shouting from the rooftops about being thrust into parallel dimensions without awkward consequences. It seems the anomaly which dislodged us from our proverbial reality also scattered us across time. This is the closest thing we get to an explanation for how Arcane's multiverse concept functions. It is possible that by parallel dimensions, Heimerdinger is referring to 2 dimensions that are running in parallel, or it is possible that he is speculating that there are more than 2 when in fact there are only 2. Heimerdinger had an expectation that Echo would arrive in the same universe as himself, which makes far more sense if there is only one other universe. The pendant alternate powder has is blue on one side and grey on the other side, potentially symbolizing the 2 different universes as 2 sides of one coin, one where Echo has blue and one where he has nothing. At the end of the episode, alternate powder places this pendant next to the hex crystals she kept, which potentially suggests that she may use them to travel to the other universe. There are multiple references to Arcane being a story of opposites. We have Silco drowning, the evolution of Powder into Jinx, Vander and Silco arriving at the same realization through different means, Piltover as the optimistic, innovative city in the clouds, Zorn as the dirty underground, Isha being a reflection of Powder, Viktor saving Jace and Jace saving Viktor, Creation and Annihilation, Original Universe, and Mirror Universe. However, as Arcane Season 2 seems to have trouble counting to 3, we also have Rage, Compassion, and Hate as 2 sides of the same coin, so maybe this means there is a secret 3rd universe that blows this whole thing wide open. Anyway, there is also a neat detail when Heimerdinger activates the machine and the Wild Rune appears. As the bits of Wild Rune cover Echo and Heimerdinger, we can see their original selves from the original universe. This potentially indicates that they are looking through the wormhole that connects these 2 universes. Additionally, this is potentially supported by this visual here, which appears during the science montage where they make a time machine. This drawing, as well as the visual design of the Z-Drive itself, appears to indicate that there are 2 separate universes that are tied together in an infinite loop, connected by the anomaly or perhaps by the Arcane as a whole. This also helps to explain how Heimerdinger could possibly create a machine that would send them back, because he only has to tell it that he wants to go to the other universe rather than one specific universe out of an infinite number of possibilities. Whilst it is acceptable within what can generously be described as the rules of the show for future Viktor to be able to harness the power of the Arcane and zap Echo, Jace, and Heimerdinger to specific universes at specific points in time, because future Viktor is essentially a god. However, it is not acceptable for Heimerdinger to create a machine that can do the same in a couple of hours. This would also mean that the Wild Rune is like a wormhole that connects the two separate universes, which is somewhat more understandable than the Wild Rune being a thing that zaps you to wherever Viktor wants you to go. This would instead mean that when Jace touched the Wild Rune, the wormhole opened and it zapped him, Echo, and Heimerdinger into the other universe. When Echo arrives back in the original universe in episode 9, there are simply no means by which he could possibly confirm if he is back in the right universe. The only way this could make any sense is if there are only two, which means Echo doesn't have to confirm it. Although that said, if there are multiple universes, I do find the idea of him approaching a random Zornite to confirm that this is his universe, only for them to reply, "Hey Echo, Ambessa has teamed up with Viktor, who is now a robot zombie wizard, and they want to take over Piltover. Savika and the Firelights are all good now, and everyone formed a cult of Jinx because she attacked Piltover again," because then Echo would have to conclude, "Oh, well that sounds nothing like the place I left. I must be in the wrong universe again." In episode 9, Viktor says, "In all timelines, in all possibilities," and the visuals show him handing different runes to Jace as a child. That Viktor says, "in all timelines," would suggest that there are many universes, but the use of the word timeline is distinct from Heimerdinger's description of parallel universes. This can be interpreted as future Viktor traveling to multiple slightly different universes, saving multiple slightly different versions of Jace, and giving them slightly different runes to see if this affects the outcome. Alternatively, as we learn, future Viktor is already a part of a recursive time loop in the original universe. Because he saves Jace, him saving Jace leads to the creation of Hextech, him zapping Jace into the Apocalypse universe leads to Jace killing him, which then leads to him evolving and trying to bring about the Apocalypse. So, when Viktor says "in all timelines," he could be referring to multiple timelines within the original universe. As in, every time he goes back and saves Jace, he tries a different rune on the same Jace with the goal of breaking out of the time loop. The problem here is that this is approximately what Viktor's chronology looks like. This is baby Viktor, this is him meeting Jace at the start of season 1, and this is him lobotomizing everyone and causing the apocalypse. If we assume that this is all the same Viktor, which is not confirmed and I'll get to that later, then this would be him coming back in time and saving Jace. Regardless of where this future Viktor came from, the apocalypse has already happened in his own past, which is why he wants to avoid it. So future Viktor's reference to all timelines could mean that he did something like this, and went backwards and forwards within the original universe multiple times to try to change the future. Where things become even more confusing, however, is that if it is possible to gain knowledge of and then change the future, then this means no particular future is set in stone. There is no such thing as inevitable causality. This would mean that the Apocalypse universe could, in fact, be a potential future of the original universe, but future Viktor's actions prevented this from ever occurring, even though it did occur because he and Jace went there after it happened. And frankly, this is where everything breaks down and it becomes impossible to comprehend, because we are at this point dealing with either two or an infinite number of alternate universes, recursive time loops, and multiple possible futures. There is not enough information in the show to dissect this any further in any kind of concrete manner, and the multiverse concept used in Arcane Season 2 does not make any sense, regardless of which multiverse concept we apply to it. But for the sake of the mental exercise, and because at this point I think this all makes a lot more sense, is more coherent and has clearer stakes if there are only two universes, let's look at the implications of this. If there are only two universes, then this has horrifying ramifications that were absolutely not considered by the writers, nor are they even implied by the show. If we try to rationalize these parallel dimensions, as the show describes them, using the twin-world multiverse model, then this would mean there are two universes. One is the normal universe, and the other is the anti-universe. But as I have already established, Arcane Season 2 presents at least 3 universes. So how can we rationalize this? Either the Apocalypse universe is unrelated to the other 2 that we spend time in, or it was the future of the original universe, or it was the future of the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe. We can immediately rule out the Apocalypse universe being the future of the original universe because we know what happens in the future of the original universe. Jace and Viktor prevent the apocalypse, and all is well. If there are only 2 universes, then this means that Jace must have been sent to the apocalyptic future of the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe. The second universe is both the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe and the Apocalypse universe. These are both the same place during different periods of time. How can this be possible? As we are told, Hextech was never invented in the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe, but Heimerdinger and Echo do create a Hextech-adjacent machine to allow Echo to go back to the original universe. This means that the power of the Arcane has been harnessed using hex crystals. This means Hextech now exists in this universe. This means this universe now has a functioning interdimensional time machine. And if the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe and the Apocalypse universe are the same universe, then this means Heimerdinger and Echo accidentally destroyed one universe in order to get back to their own. So is it reasonable that this could happen? Unfortunately for the writers, yes, it is absolutely reasonable. Alternate Powder is repeatedly told by Alternate Vander as well as Echo to live up to her potential. Your ideas change the world. I can't shake the feeling that that's who you're supposed to be. She quite feasibly could have continued research and development of this incredible technology, if for no other reason than that she realized Echo was from the other universe and she now knows that it is possible to travel between them. Alternate Powder has 3 hex crystals. She has the ability and the desire to invent incredible things and to essentially fulfill the same role that Jace filled in Season 1. Alternate Powder is going to become something adjacent to the Woman of Progress. She is going to create incredible technology to help people, and given that all but 2 variables are identical in this universe, we can be all but certain that the Hex Gates will be created. This will lead to a wild rune appearing deep underground. And importantly, the apocalyptic future does not require that Jinx nuke Viktor, that Viktor absorb the Hex Core, and that this then drive him towards his inevitable glorious evolution. It only requires that someone do something similar. A Hex Core may or may not be necessary. All we know for certain is that Hextech is necessary, and thanks to Echo and Heimerdinger, Alternate Powder now has access to Hextech. Regardless, all of this has been orchestrated by an entity that I am referring to as Future Viktor. I don't know where Future Viktor came from, but there are a couple of possibilities. Either Future Viktor is the continuation of the Viktor we have seen in Arcane. After the finale, he managed to undestroy himself somehow, and he realized he needed to do multiversal time travel to convince Jace to convince him not to lobotomize everyone. Or, in other words, he had to fulfill his destiny and play a part in his own past. I think this is very unlikely, because Future Viktor does not look anything like the evolved Viktor we get in Act 3, unless he undid that and got a new non-Hextech body, I guess. And this would mean Future Viktor has the explicit knowledge of everything Viktor does in Season 2, but couldn't come up with a better way to stop him than asking Jace to stop him in an unspecified manner. Alternatively, if there are only 2 universes, Future Viktor must be the future version of that universe's Viktor. He failed to stop the apocalypse in the Happy Fun Time Bad Writing universe, and so he decided to try and save the original universe. He attempted multiple times to prevent the apocalypse by looping back around and giving Jace different runes. And this would be conceptually possible by getting around the whole determinism thing, provided there are only 2 universes. Alternatively, if there are an infinite number of universes, then there are an infinite number of Viktors, which means I can't meaningfully determine who this guy is or where he came from. Thank you for listening, guys. This video is an excerpt from my upcoming final installment of Arcane Annihilation of a Masterpiece, which will be on the main channel as soon as I finish editing it. I hope you have enjoyed, and I hope I haven't scrambled your brain too much. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.